My name is Julia. I am 29 years old. I live in Colorado. I moved here 3 years ago, hoping to start fresh. I thought things would be better, but life didn't turn out how I expected. I work as a cashier in a small hardware store. It's not exciting, but it pays my bills. I live in a small house. I cook simple meals, clean the place, and try to stay busy. Most days are quiet. I go to work, I come home, and I eat dinner alone. I have two older brothers. They live in Denver. They both have jobs, wives, and children. We were close when we were kids, but now we rarely speak. They don't visit. They don't call. They say they are busy. Maybe that's true. But sometimes I wonder if they just don't care. My father is still alive. He used to call me on Sundays. We would talk about simple things, weather, work, memories of Mom. But after she passed away 5 years ago, he changed. Now, he calls only my brothers. I've tried to call him, but he doesn't say much. His words feel cold. Last Christmas, I asked if I could come over. He said he was going to Rick's house. I asked if I could join them. He told me, "There's already too many people. Maybe next time." I said okay. Then I turned off my phone and cried for an hour. I didn't know why I still hoped. That night I made soup for one. I watched a movie and pretended it was just another day. I wrapped a small candle for myself and opened it like a gift. I even smiled for a second. But later, when I went to bed, the house felt too quiet. My heart felt heavy. At work, I try to smile. Customers like me because I'm polite. They say, "You always look happy, Julia." But they don't know how I feel when I go home. They don't know I eat in silence. They don't know I sometimes cry while folding laundry. There is one person who notices me. She lives in the small house next to mine. She is older than me, maybe in her 60s. Her hair is gray, and she wears warm sweaters in winter. I don't know much about her past. She told me once that her husband passed away 10 years ago. She lives alone too. The first time we spoke, I was shoveling snow. She walked over with 2 cups of hot tea and said, "You look cold. Come warm up." I didn't know her well, but her voice felt kind. I followed her into her house. It was small but cozy. A pot of soup was cooking on the stove. She talked while I sipped the tea. I didn't say much, but I felt safe. Since then, she always checks on me. She never knocks for long. If I don't answer, she leaves something at my door. A small bag with cookies. A note that says, "Hope you're doing okay." Sometimes a flower from her garden in spring. One time, I opened my door after work and found a slice of apple pie. No name. Just a napkin and a fork. One Saturday, I didn't leave the house. I was tired and sad. I didn't cook. I didn't clean. I just sat on the sofa and stared at the wall. Around noon, I heard a soft knock. I didn't answer. A few minutes later, I checked the door. There was a container of soup and a piece of bread. I heated it up and cried while eating. She never asked why I was quiet that day. The next time we spoke, she smiled and said, "It's okay to have slow days. Just don't forget to eat." One day at work, I slipped on the floor and hurt my ankle. It wasn't broken, but walking was hard. I took 2 days off. On the first day, I woke up late and limped to the kitchen. I didn't have much food at home. I didn't feel strong enough to go out. That afternoon, I heard a soft knock. She was standing there with a grocery bag, bread, milk, eggs, even bananas. I didn't ask for help, but somehow she knew. She didn't stay long. She just said, "Get some rest," and left. That evening, I sat by the window with tea and watched the snow fall. My ankle still hurt, but my heart felt lighter. I said to myself, "She's the only one who checks on me. She doesn't have much. She gets by with what she has. But she always shares. She remembers my birthday. She always says, 'Tell me if you need something,' and she means it." A few weeks ago, I saw my father's car drive past my street. He didn't stop. Maybe he didn't see my house, or maybe he did. I wanted to believe he was in a rush, but part of me knew he didn't want to see me. That night, I didn't cry. I just stared out the window and felt nothing. The next day, I told my neighbor, "I saw my dad yesterday." She looked at me and said, "Did he come in?" I shook my head. She didn't ask more questions. She didn't say sorry. She just brought me tea and sat beside me. We didn't talk much. She didn't need to fix anything. She just stayed. And that's when I knew. Only one person stayed with me. And it wasn't my father. It wasn't my brothers. It wasn't old friends from school. It was someone who had no reason to care, but chose to. Winter was long that year. Snow covered everything. The trees were white. The roads were empty. Many nights, I stayed inside and watched the snow fall. It was beautiful, but cold, just like the people in my life. I did not hear from my father again. I did not hear from my brothers either. I checked my phone sometimes, hoping for a message. But there was nothing, not even a simple "How are you?" At work, people talked about their families. They said, "We are planning a big dinner." They said, "My brother is visiting this weekend." I smiled and listened, but inside, I felt small. I felt forgotten. One Friday evening, the snow was heavy. I finished work and walked home. The cold air hurt my face. My feet were wet. I was tired. I wanted someone to ask if I was okay, but no one did. When I reached my house, my neighbor's porch light was on. I could see her standing by her window. She waved when she saw me. I waved back. Her small smile warmed my heart more than anything else that day. Later that night, there was a knock on my door. It was her again. She was holding a big blanket. "I thought you might need this," she said. I smiled and thanked her. The blanket was soft and warm. It smelled like her house. a mix of cinnamon and flowers. That night, I wrapped myself in the blanket and slept better than I had in weeks. The next morning, I made pancakes. I made extra. I put some on a plate and walked over to her house. She opened the door and laughed. "For me?" she said. I nodded. "For you." We sat in her kitchen and ate pancakes. Her kitchen was small, but it felt big because it was full of kindness. There was an old clock ticking on the wall. A small radio played soft music. It felt like home. We talked about small things. The weather, her garden, a movie she saw on TV. She didn't ask about my family. She didn't make me talk about my sadness. She just made me feel like I belonged. After breakfast, we sat by her fireplace. I looked around her house. It was full of memories, pictures of her husband, pictures of her friends, a shelf full of books. I asked, "Do you miss your husband?" She smiled sadly and said, "Every day." I asked, "Does it get easier?" She thought for a moment and said, "You don't forget the people you love, but you learn how to keep living, and you open your heart to new people." I nodded. Her words stayed with me. Before I share the rest of my story, I want to ask you something. Where are you listening from? Sometimes I wonder if someone out there truly hears me, someone who understands what I'm feeling. It gives me strength to know I'm not alone. So please, tell me in the comments. Days passed. The snow started to melt. Small patches of green showed through the white. Spring was coming. I felt a little stronger every day. One evening, I decided to clean my house. I opened all the windows. I washed the floors. I changed the curtains. I threw away things I didn't need. It felt good. After I finished, I baked cookies. I put a few in a small bag and walked to my neighbor's house. When she opened the door, I smiled and said, "Thank you for everything." She hugged me gently. She said, "You don't have to thank me. That's what friends do." It was the first time I heard her call me a friend. I smiled. It felt right. A few weeks later, my brother Ben sent a message. It was short. It said, "Hope you're doing okay." I stared at the message. I didn't know what to say. I typed, "I'm fine, thanks." I didn't ask about him. I didn't ask about his life. I just closed the conversation. For a long time, I had tried to hold on to people who didn't hold on to me. I gave them my love, my time, my hope. But they didn't see me. They didn't choose me. My neighbor chose me. She chose to care when she didn't have to. She stayed. One Sunday, we planted flowers together. It was warm and sunny. We wore hats to protect our heads from the sun. We planted daisies, roses, and small blue flowers I didn't know the name of. I laughed when I got dirt on my face. She laughed too. It felt good to laugh like that. While we worked, she said, "You're stronger than you think, Julia." I looked at her and smiled. That afternoon, we sat on her porch with glasses of cold lemonade. We watched the birds fly by. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. I thought about my family. I thought about all the times I waited for them to care. I thought about the birthdays they forgot, the holidays I spent alone. And then I thought about today, about planting flowers, about laughing, about sitting here, feeling safe and wanted. I realized something important. I didn't need a lot of people. I didn't need big promises. I didn't need fancy gifts or perfect words. I just needed someone who stayed. Summer came. The flowers we planted grew strong and bright. Every morning I watered them. Every evening I sat by the window and watched them sway in the wind. Sometimes my neighbor would come over with fresh bread. Sometimes I would bring her cookies or tea. We shared small things, but those small things filled the big empty spaces inside me. One day I asked her, "Why did you help me? I was just a stranger." She smiled and said, "Because everyone needs someone, and you deserved better." Her words made me cry, not because they hurt, but because they healed. Fall came quickly. The leaves turned red and gold. The air smelled like apples and wood smoke. I loved walking outside and hearing the leaves crunch under my boots. One evening, my brother Rick called. He said he was in town. He asked if I wanted to meet for coffee. I agreed. We met at a small cafe downtown. He looked tired. His hair was thinner. His face was older. We talked about small things. His job. His kids. His busy life. He asked me, "How have you been?" I smiled and said, "Good. Really good." He nodded but didn't ask more. When the coffee was finished, he said, "We should talk more." I smiled politely and said, "Maybe?" I walked home feeling light. I realized I didn't need their attention anymore. I didn't need to chase their love. I didn't need their approval. I already had something better. I had real care, real friendship, real love from someone who stayed. That night, I sat by my window with a cup of tea. The stars were bright. The air was cool. I wrapped myself in the blanket my neighbor gave me months ago. It still smelled a little like cinnamon. I thought about everything I lost. I thought about everything I gained. I smiled and whispered to myself, only one person stayed with me, and that was enough. Winter came again. The air turned cold. Snow covered the ground. But this winter, I felt different. I was not as lonely as before. I had built a small, quiet life, and I was finally at peace with it. I still worked at the hardware store. I still lived in my small house, but inside, something had changed. I no longer waited for messages from my family. I no longer hoped for invitations. I accepted that they had their own lives. I stopped blaming myself. Every Sunday afternoon, I visited my neighbor. We drank tea or coffee. Sometimes we baked together. Sometimes we just sat in silence. It was simple. It was enough. One Sunday, she gave me a small book. It was a notebook with a blue cover. She said, "Write about your days. Even small days are important." I started writing. Every evening I wrote a few lines. I wrote about the snow, the customers at work, the birds outside the window. Some days were easy. Some days were hard. But writing helped me see that even on lonely days, there was still something good. One evening in January, I got a call from my father. I was surprised. I had not heard from him in almost a year. I picked up the phone. He said, "Julia, I'm sorry." I didn't know what to say. I stayed quiet. He continued, "I should have been there for you. After your mom died, I didn't know how to handle it. I pulled away from everyone." I listened. He said, "I hope we can talk more. I miss you." His voice sounded honest, but part of me felt cautious. I didn't know if things could go back to how they were. I said, "Maybe we can start small." He agreed. We talked for a few more minutes. He told me about his health, about how he was getting older. I listened, but I didn't rush to open my heart fully. I had learned that trust needs time. When I hung up, I didn't cry. I didn't feel broken. I felt calm. I realized something. I was strong enough now to forgive, but also strong enough to protect my heart. The next day, I told my neighbor about the call. She smiled and said, "Healing takes time. Let it happen slowly." I was glad she understood. She never pushed me. She never gave me big advice. She just stayed close and let me be myself. Spring came early that year. The flowers we planted last year started to bloom again. Yellow, pink, and purple flowers filled our small gardens. The days were longer. The air was softer. One Saturday, I decided to visit a local art class. I had always loved painting when I was a child. But after my mother died, I stopped doing things that made me happy. Now, I wanted to start again. The art class was small, just a few people sitting around a big table. The teacher gave us colors and paper. I felt nervous at first. My hand shook a little when I picked up the brush. But once I started painting, I felt peaceful. I painted flowers, just like the ones in my garden. When I finished, the teacher said, "You have a soft touch. Keep painting." I smiled. I felt proud of myself. I started going to the class every Saturday. I made new friends. Small friendships, slow friendships. People who liked simple things like painting, tea, and long walks. Life was not exciting. It was not full of big parties or loud celebrations. But it was full of real moments. Moments that mattered. One evening, after painting class, I walked home and stopped by my neighbor's house. I showed her one of my paintings. It was a small picture of our two houses side by side with flowers in between. She looked at it and smiled. "It's beautiful," she said. "Just like our little street." I framed the painting and hung it in my living room. Every time I looked at it, I remembered how far I had come. I remembered that even when life gets cold and lonely, there are always people who care. Even if it's just one person, it is enough. In early summer, my father visited me. It was a short visit. He looked older, thinner. He brought a box of my mother's things: old photos, her favorite cookbook, a small jewelry box. We sat at my kitchen table and looked through the photos together. We talked about old times. Some memories made us laugh. Some made us quiet. It was not easy, but it was a start. Before he left, he said, "You have made a good life, Julia. Your mom would be proud." I smiled and said, "Thank you." I didn't ask him to stay longer. I didn't ask him to visit again soon. I let it be. I understood now that not every relationship would be perfect. Some would stay small. Some would grow. Some would stay distant. But I was strong enough to accept all of it. That evening, I visited my neighbor. We sat outside as the sun went down. The sky turned orange and pink. The air smelled like fresh grass. She said, "It's been a good year." I nodded. "The best year in a long time." She smiled and said, "You see? Sometimes life brings the right people at the right time." I looked at her and felt a deep thankfulness. She was not part of my past. She was not someone I had grown up with, but she was the person who stayed, the person who saw me when no one else did. Before going home, I hugged her. A real hug. A thank you hug. She said, "You will always have a place here, Julia." And I believed her. As I walked home, I thought about everything that had changed. I thought about the girl I was last year, sitting alone by the window, feeling forgotten. I thought about the woman I was now, stronger, softer, more open to life. Only one person stayed with me, but that one person made all the difference. She showed me that love is not always loud. Care is not always grand. Sometimes it is quiet, soft, and steady. And sometimes that is exactly what saves you.